Where's my Post-it notes? I had like 1,000 of them somewhere. I can't find them.
You have 1,000 Post-it notes?
There's not really that many. Like a couple stacks.
Okay, but they're not all about me, though.
No, these are blank Post-it notes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like to write notes during my conversations, and that way I'm not interrupting you the whole time.
Gotcha. I thought you had 1,000 Post-it notes for our interview, and I was like, that's legit right there.
I know some people probably spend that much effort doing these interviews, but unfortunately, I have 2 kids. I ain't got no time for that. All right, are you ready, dude?
Let's roll.
Let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. Have you picked up your copy of Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft Beyond Pixels and Prototypes yet? Unlock the secrets of UX success and learn all the things they didn't teach you in school. Listen until the end for an exclusive code to get 10% off your copy. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book to learn more. This week's episode is brought to you by Wix Studio. Career shifters, people building portfolios, web designers, this one's for you. I've only got 1 minute to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things that you can do from start to finish in 1 minute or less on Studio. You can adapt your designs for every device with responsive AI. You can reuse assets like templates, widgets, sections, and design libraries across all your sites and share them with your team. You can switch up the styling of hundreds of web pages. That means fonts, layouts, and colors, all in a click. You can add no-code animations and gradient backgrounds right in the editor. And my favorite, you can export your designs from Figma to Wix Studio in just 1 click. Oh, and one more big one, package and deliver everything your client needs in one smooth handover. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/Wix to learn more. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you can imagine. As always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. And you can get instant access to the video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. Oh, man. All right.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Now, as UX designers, there are lots of industries where you can get a job. And let's face it, many of those industries will be industries where you don't know anything about it. So the chances are very good that whatever job you get, you won't have a clue about the industry until you start working, what the users want, why the app exists, any of that stuff. And that's why I've got my good buddy Casey Bombacie on the show today. Casey, I love that name, man. Such a great name.
Thank you.
Casey got a UX gig working in casinos and gaming, and he didn't really know much about it. But since landing in the gaming industry, he's done some pretty amazing work. So we're going to talk to Casey today all about how a UX designer can get a job in an industry that they don't know anything about and still do some kick-ass work. Casey's been in product and design for over 15 years. He's worked in a lot of different domains and industries from fitness tech, casinos, to enterprise B2B and more. He's won an award for his product design as well as getting patented. That's pretty cool. I need to ask you about that for another feature. And he is currently the founder of happydesign.io, the Netflix of design. Casey, welcome to Beyond UX Design. So good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Glad to be here.
I'm going to stop talking for a second. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about you. And I know I read that bio, but tell us a little bit about you and how'd you get into this new industry you know anything about and thriving, man? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't start out in UX design. I'm 45, just for full disclosure. That's where the beautiful gray on my salt and pepper face.
Yeah, if you pay $5 a month, you can get access to see Casey's beautiful salt and pepper beard along with mine.
Exactly. We're in our Clooney years, is what I tell people.
Yeah, right.
So
I like that.
I actually graduated with a geography degree from the University of Washington. Go Dogs.
Right on, man.
And started doing geographic information systems, which is basically what every local government, federal government use to set up land acquisition, plotting, urban development. And this was back before there was such a thing as an app. and everything was done on the web, and everything was super slow. I think the University of Washington, when I graduated in 2000, had a T1 line for the whole
Oh, wow.
campus.
Oh my God.
For the whole campus. You know what I
Jeez.
mean? Like now it's like we have one on our phone. And so I started just doing, I've always done websites because there were no apps. And then in 2009, I was working for a nonprofit, and they were like, "Hey, can you make an app?" And I was like, "I think so." It looks like more design. It looks like smaller versions of it. And then from there, I pretty much discovered that there was a whole industry called user experience design, and really kind of fell in love with it. I've always been more on the creative side, and the graphics and branding and logos, which is pretty typical for UX designers of our age. Just started out in that arena and then switched over.
True that, man.
And what I found out that I really loved was there was a portion of my brain that wasn't necessarily being used just on the creative side. There was sort of the left side of the brain where there's these analytics and there's this data. And I love the behavioral psychology side of UX design, what motivates users, how we can and cannot be persuasive, and sort of the morality of user experience design is really fascinating. And so it really just, as I began to dive more into it, like, wow, this is really cool. And I love being able to find data points, quantitative and qualitative data points to help drive design decisions. And that just was like, oh, this is like the best of both worlds in my mind. Like, here's this creative outlet where you get to design flows and, think about how people are doing stuff. Like in the real world, we have places like Disneyland where somebody thought about an experience and every step along the way, what makes that experience great. And there's times where you can just breeze through Main Street USA, you know what I mean? And there's times where you can stop and be like, oh, there's a light bulb where they had an odd number of light bulbs. And so they painted half red and half white. And that somebody thought about that was like, we can't have two reds in a row or two whites in a row. And so the solution was we'll cut it, we'll paint it half and half. Those things are just what really drove me into experience design. So I joined a fitness tech startup. That was like the intro to my, after I designed the app for the nonprofit, I was like, I want to do this full time, not just be a creative director. I was like, I dove in, started at the bottom of a fitness tech startup. There was like 4 of us. There was a CEO who was also the main coder engineer. There was a junior engineer, a product manager, me, a marketing guy. I guess that makes 5. And then 6, there was a fulfillment guy because we had a barbell collar that sent data to your phone for training.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, really interesting. Accelerometers and an altimeter in it. So it would actually train you in Olympic weightlifting styles and record your lifts.
Oh, wow. Okay. Like help your form and stuff, like with digitally tracking.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool, man.
Yeah, the name of the company was Form Lifting.
Form Lifting. Is it still around?
No, it's not, sadly.
Unfortunately, the way most startups tend to go. So, well, let me ask you this. We were originally talking about, how you got into casinos and gaming and stuff. But when you got into the fitness app, did you even lift, bro? Did you not know anything about weightlifting and stuff before you started with that company too?
Fortunately, I did have a leg up there because I had been doing CrossFit for about 4 or 5 years. So it was like when I saw it and then I saw what they were doing, I was like, oh, I know exactly what we're talking about. At the same time, though, I didn't even know how to use Sketch. Full disclosure now, 15 years later, I was literally, as I was driving into the office, I lived in LA at the time, driving from Santa Monica to downtown LA. And I would watch videos on my phone of how to use Sketch. And
you didn't say driving. You didn't say while you were driving, right? This is like on a bus, I hope.
No, yeah. Of course. I was just listening to the video.
Listening. Okay. All right. Yeah. If anyone, law enforcement, you're out there listening, I think there's probably statute of limitations is probably passed on that.
I think, statute of limitations is passed for sure. But it was one of those things, kind of in the theme of this whole podcast today of basically going from 0 to 1. I think that's been one of my biggest strengths of like, I know nothing. How do I get to something? And in that case, here I was, literally like learning as I was going, learning how to put together personas, learning how to, I watched a ton of LinkedIn videos and YouTube videos on user experience design in just preparation for the interview. One of the best things you can do for an interview is come over prepared. And I came over prepared. They wanted to do a whiteboard exercise. And so I made user personas for the company which I barely knew anything about, just from like 2 or 3 conversations with the CEO. And so I was like, I came over prepared. I had like printed out like user personas, and then I had printed out flows. And yeah, I know back when things are printed.
Who prints anymore?
And so yeah, and so when they came, they were like, "Where did you get these user personas?" I was like, I just kind of made them up."
Oh, dude, I love that.
Yeah, and they were super excited by that, and they basically like they called me the next day, and they were like, "Hey, it was like glaringly obvious you're the right man for the job," and I got the job, and which is totally awesome. Started working downtown LA, and just doing UX for it was the first time I'd actually been doing it, as a job title, and literally just was learning like building the airplane while you're flying kind of mentality, and unfortunately, I had enough sort of scrappiness. And I think as an UX designer, one of my specialties has always been 0 to 1. You have nothing, you have no knowledge, or you have no experience, and then going to something, some knowledge, some experience. And I think that has proved well for me. And I think what a lot of designers, we don't ever start off 0 because we always have some knowledge or wisdom, or you watch a video or whatever. But as you go through, you step into these new industries, it's like you have to be able to be like water, as Bruce Lee says, right? And just find a way around the obstacle that's in front of you. Being able to like, okay, I can't do it this way. A good example is I was at ServiceNow. I'd been working for all these startups beforehand. And so it was like you always had direct access to a user.
Oh, ServiceNow. I can imagine going from a startup to a place like ServiceNow has got to be night and day, man.
Yeah, 300 designers alone. You know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, I want to talk to a user about this product. They're like, well, that's going to be hard. That's going to take a month. Of just like red. So I was like, okay, what do I do here? Like, how do I design a product for a user who I've never had a conversation with? And so I actually reached out to the research team. Was like, when are you doing interviews? What do you have? And just found a way to get around it. You know what I mean? Found a way to talk to users and, sort of work within their system to do that. I think a lot of people would see that and they would kind of give up and be like, well, I'll just design without users. You know what I mean? And that happens in a lot of companies. It's just like, hey, we don't have any contact, but the PM is your user, essentially, in that case. And they're just telling you what features to put in. And I think you do a disservice to the users. And I think with a little bit of effort, you can work your way around that obstacle and be like, no, I'm going to be a user experience designer. And if you want to call it user experience designer, product designer, I don't really care. But if you're designing something for humans, then you should talk to humans, is my philosophy.
You could bring up a good point, too, about this idea of 0 to 1. It could be the industry. It could be a skill. It could be a feature in Figma that you don't know anything about. But you've got to figure out how to get from 0 to 1 or half to 1 or point whatever to 1 and get there. So I want to talk a little bit about your experience, though, getting into gaming and casinos, because that's such an interesting topic. I've never even really thought about UX for casinos before. Right. And I imagine there's all kinds of other just like ethical implications and legal things and regulatory things you probably have to consider that, joining a casino or a gaming app or team or whatever it is. Hopefully you'll school me on that today, by the way.
Yeah.
And then you sort of have to like figure out how to like, help the business make money, right?
Right.
That's really fascinating. I want to talk about that. Tell me, how did you get into casinos of all things? It seems like such a random industry, but I'm really curious about how you got into that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, I think casinos are a massive outlier when it comes to just product. They're kind of like theme parks. You think about it, but you don't really think about it. And to be honest, I'd set foot in a casino once before I worked with this company. And that was to go see Celine Dion with my wife back in like 2003 or something like that. So, which was a great show, mind you. It was like a Cirque du Soleil Celine Dion.
Yeah, that's cool.
And my heart, and my heart will go on. And that was like prime. My heart will go on. So it was rad. I saw this company. We were looking to move from LA to San Diego, and they were based in San Diego. And they were just a casino. They were a business-to-business casino operations company. So within a casino, there's basically 3 major verticals. There's the floor, which is the slots and the tables. There's the marketing department. And then there's hosting. And hosting is, kind of what you always see. Like those are the people who give you the comps and things like that. That is essentially a sales job. A host is there to do whatever they possibly can to get you to stay longer in the casino and spend more in the casino. You know what I mean? The persona is like, they come off as like super friendly. Oh, wow, you did this. Here's $25 for food and beverage credit. You know what I mean? There's 2 tiers of casinos as well. There's the Caesars and the Harrah's of the world, which are, publicly traded conglomerates. they have all their data teams, and they're essentially finance companies that just specialize in casinos, right? Getting money out of people. Then there's in Southern California and a lot of America now, there's tribal casinos. So this company was really focused on tribal and small casinos. And what's different about tribal casinos is every single tribal casino it's its own, sovereign nation. And so you essentially have to work, like if you want to get your product into a sovereign nation, there's a ton of hoops to fly through. And what's different about that, though, what's different from the sort of the conglomerates to the tribal casino is they don't have the data these conglomerates have access to, right? You've got, quantitative people who are just crunching numbers all the time. So a small casino, it could be, like an average Vegas floor is probably 2,500 slots. 3,000 slots on the floor would be a big casino floor. The casino up the road, Pechanga, has 5,000 slots on its floor, which is massive. One of the famous ones in San Diego, which has been around for a long time, is called Verona. When we started talking to their floor operator, so the product that I began to work on was we wanted to put together basically the way the slot floor works is 30% of the slot floor is rearranged every single month.
Really?
Which is insane to think about.
Why is that? Is that to keep it fresh and new and interesting, or is there some other reason for that?
It's imagine it like a mall. Every square foot has to produce X amount of dollars. And so what they're trying to do is, like you said, there's a little bit of refreshing. There's a little bit of tinkering. There's experimentation of, if you get a new slot machine that comes in, am I going to put this front and center? Because if I put it front and center, will it make more than my current front and center machine? And so there's a lot of interesting sort of experience design that goes into just on the floor side of things. So like when you walk in, what's the first slot you see? Why do you see it? And then if I look, throughout the whole floor, what do I see? There's different types of, they call them toppers. There's maybe a siren, so like a cop car siren, or there's a full placard, or, and everything's now LED. So there's like full LED, like tunnel slot machines and stuff like that. So crazy. So with that the main problem statement is, if I move my slot floor 30% every single month, how do I know which machines do I need to add, remove, reconfigure, or just move in general? Reconfigure is like, I've got this cabinet and I can just literally swap it from Sir Mix-a-Lot's Big Butts to Rake and Bacon. You know what I mean? Same cabinet style, just it's a reskin, essentially.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's really, like I said, I set foot at a casino once before that. And that was back when you could play with coins. Now everything is, there's wireless chargers on the slot machine. You can do Apple Pay. Yeah, exactly. You can do Apple Pay. It's, again, you want to talk about frictionless. Casinos are paving the way on frictionless payment. Mastered it.
Oh, that's so crazy. Yeah. So, as I'm thinking about this, and you tell me if maybe I'm thinking about this incorrectly, but I'm thinking about an industry I don't know anything about, right? There's the industry itself that you've got to learn, right? And in the case of casinos, all kinds of regulations, I'm sure, local governments, federal governments, all kinds of stuff around what you can and can't do. But then there's also the UX side of it, where you think about the users and the people and what they expect and need, and so I'm kind of like picturing this in my head. There's sort of two facets that you need to learn. You have to learn the system, and then you have to learn the people and all the individual, their mental models and all the things that would, work for them. Because I imagine something that might work really well for a casino patron, I don't know what you call them, a patron, might be completely different from some other kind of system somewhere else, or mental model somewhere else. So is that kind of like, right? Is that how you kind of, I want to talk through that.
Yeah.
You mentioned you never stepped foot in a casino before that. How do you approach embracing those systems when you've just got no insight at all into that industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, for me, it was like a devouring of content. On one hand, just like they had subscribed to, of course, there's something called the Casino Journal. You know what I mean? Where it's for casino operators. I'm sure there's
an casino association, and everything. I'm sure that
exactly. And so it was just like, this was specifically, it was a journal geared for casino operators and marketing teams and slot operators, and sort of the three verticals of like what's hot in the industry. And so I started just I started reading through, skimming different articles, seeing what was interesting. And that was really just like, hey, we're slot operators, we're casino operators. This is what we do. Like sometimes it would talk about technology. Sometimes it would talk about like a KYC, a know your customer, like how important that is for government regulations and things like that. Which again, in that industry, know your customer is huge because of fraud, right? So you have to know these things. You have to have driver's license, all that kind of stuff. So that was like a new thing to me because I was doing, I said startups, and we didn't really. It was know your customer was like, I know this guy's email and first name, last name, that kind of thing. Where now it's like we've got to know exactly not where these things are going, but like how are they working it, and understanding that's a huge part of it to avoid fraud regulation with the U.S. government.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask a question about that because I actually came from GE Aerospace, obviously, big giant corporation making military sometimes jets, passenger jets, commercial jets, and stuff like that. But we actually were really impacted by all the sanctions against Russia recently with the Ukraine war.
Interesting.
And so for us, the know your customer thing was huge because we, like Russia, Iran, they would set up these shell companies trying to get around stuff to buy GE parts.
Right.
And so our job before we could sell anything, we had to vet these people and like do it would take months and stuff to go and like figure out where is this, what's that address, is there a known person that like is associated with this and blah, blah, blah. And like all these red flags that would set off. And, before we could ever sign a contract, accept payment, whatever, that was like such a super fascinating concept. Actually, before I left GE, I was working on something that had to do a lot with like onboarding, customer onboarding, and that whole know your customer thing was huge. And it's so funny when you said KYC, like that acronym, just like I was getting flashbacks of like all these meetings at GE. KYC, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm sorry. I like totally sidetracked you there, but that's like such a fascinating thing. And it's funny because like, I feel like as UX designers, everybody wants to work at a FANG company and these big like commercial things. And there's so much of this, like these little nuanced things at so many different companies that it sounds boring when you talk about it up like at a high level. People might, it's boring, but it's so fascinating. Yeah. All of these little things. I love talking to other people who are in just these really random spaces because there's just so much interesting stuff. But then on the other hand, there's also similarities like the KYC thing. Like I know what you're talking about. Anyway, I don't know. It's just like really funny to me how people approach this. And anyway, I don't know. Anyway, totally thinking out loud, side tangent.
No, I love it. I love it.
Didn't mean to interrupt you. You were in the middle of telling a story. Proceed. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think that's what's like you said, there's this concept that, anything you do in user experience design can essentially be ported over to something else. And this is actually what has helped me over my years because I've not stayed in one industry twice. I don't think that's not been on purpose. You know what I mean? Like I'd be like, I want to jump to a different industry. It just kind of was like what things interest me, what opportunities there were, and in reality, that has helped shape and change a lot of some of the things that some of the places I have worked at because I had strange knowledge, so to speak. I worked for a health tech startup and they had this huge onboarding flow. And I'd also worked in mobile gaming before that, produced a mobile game in 2020 called Frontrunners, which was like a Subway Surfers with political figures. And you'd jump over.
Oh, like a runner.
And a ton of fun.
That's so funny, dude. Yeah, I love that.
Still live on the App Store.
Oh, really? Okay.
Shameless plug. And it's free. It's a free to play. But with a free to play game, a mobile game, you have less than 20 seconds to get a user engaged in the game. And so your onboarding cannot be this 12 screen process. Yeah. The whole concept is get a user using the product. And when you're an enterprise, when you're a B2B, a company's paying you, $10,000 to $100,000 a month to use your product. And so you have this disgusting luxury of just like, oh yeah, we're going to do 5, calls with the customer, the client management team. And here's a book. Here's a book you can read on how to use our product, like stupid stuff like that. Right. And so as I had some of that mobile gaming experience, I was able to bring that into a lot of different companies over the last several years on how to improve their onboarding and be like, your onboarding is garbage. The tooltips thing where you come into, I worked for a 2-sided marketplace. It was for travel nurses. And we switched from being a walled garden where you had to register first, and then you could look at the jobs to just being an open marketplace. And then once you clicked on it, once you wanted to apply for a job, you'd register. And they were like, okay, well, we created a beautiful, job search screen. One of the team members, one of my designers on my team wanted to put tooltips like, this is a search bar. These are filters. And I said, why would you do that? And they were like, well, just so they know. I was like, you don't think they know what a search bar is? You know, and I just was like trying to be incredibly. I was trying to be too totally snarky, but I was like, you know, how low of an opinion do we have of our users that we need to show them like this is if they cannot look at it and recognize immediately that this is a search bar and this is a filter, they may not call them a filter. They may just call them, you know, these things. You know, they fix it so I can, you know, refine my search better or whatever. You know, most people would call it a filter. You know, but if we have to explain our product to people, then we haven't done our research, you know, then we haven't done our work and being able to be like, this is what it should be. Like people should be like, oh, yeah, I get it. So going back to the casino industry, the product that we wanted to launch, I started in like January of 2019. We wanted to launch a product by October, an MVP. And it was basically going to help slot floor operators decide which of those machines they were going to add, remove, move, or reconfigure. And so as I began to jump in, I was like, okay, I need to talk to slot floor operators. You know, what do they even do? Who are they? One of the local casinos here in San Diego, they did all of their operations by gut.
Wow.
I know. I was like, I sat down, I was talking to him, and
Sounds like a lot of money to just trust in someone's gut.
And it's like, the guy's like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know. We know how to trust my gut. And they were making a fortune. You know what I mean? They had a ton of money. So, I mean, he obviously had a really good gut health.
He had a good gut. A lot of yogurt he's been eating, I guess.
Exactly.
Like
Probiotics. The next level up was some people had Excel spreadsheets. So that was the user persona that we were going for. Somebody who didn't really trust technology because they knew how to do it themselves and, you know, were very tactile, physical. Like I walk the floor and so I can see that there's 10 people waiting for this machine or 3 people or whatever. And so I know that this is a big one. So I'm going to add 2 more of those machines and I'm going to put them over here. And what we did was we're going to begin to write an algorithm and show you just on your statistics which machines outperform other machines. And so we had a list of 10 different basically performance metrics. It outperformed by cabinet. So like the shape of the cabinet, this theme outperformed this other theme, this location outperformed it, this denomination. So if it was like a 10-cent denomination, you know what I mean? Which is like, you can play up to, you know, some of the, you can play $100 per spin, you know, which is insane to think about. Yeah.
No, thanks.
Yeah. Like $100 per spin. So we began to show them like, all these metrics, and we talked to them like, okay, what do you think about this metric? And we're having so many conversations with the slot floor operators, and we'd go and we'd walk the floors with them, and we'd listen to like how they thought about locations and sizes and games, and how they thought something was going to be a hit just off their gut. Like, oh, I saw this one. They, you know, Konami came in with a new slot machine. They're like, this one's going to be a hit. I'd be like, how do you know? Why do you think that? You know, how did you get into that space? You know, and they're like, oh, I just know, you know, X, Y, and Z and the shape and the size of it. And I was like, that's, you know, it's a lot of knowledge and it's really interesting, right? So we began to just start putting together first just low wireframes, just like gray blocks, like even getting to this, you know, I guess I've mentioned a couple of times now the add, remove, reconfigure, and move. Like we had to get to even to those 4 spots first. Like, what do we even want to show a user? What are they interested in? What is their flow? And we began to look at all these different floor operations. And those were the 4 main things that they always did. They either added a machine. And if you add a machine, that means you got to take away a machine, right? Because you can't, if you have 3,000 slots, you just can't add one in there. So something's got to go. If you reconfigure a machine, that's easy. You just swap out the theme. And then if you move something, then something else has to be moved. And so as we were like going through this, we're like, okay, I did a really simple interface. We started showing the operators and they were like, okay, you know, does this work? You know what I mean? And we were like showing them like, okay, here's what we want to do. And they were like, okay, good. And we got to the point where the CEO would come in and he'd check like how's things going, like, oh, we're moving some good stuff. And finally it was probably about, I don't know, maybe March, April. And we had a high fidelity mock-up to show to our CEO. We're going to present it to him. And as soon as it was just fake mode because we don't want to write any codes yet. As soon as I showed it up in the meeting, he was like, he just looked at me and goes, duh. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? And he was a casino operator himself and had worked through the floor and up to the ranks. And he just looked at it and was like, duh, like this makes 100% sense. This is exactly what they need. And my goal as a UX designer is to always get to duh. This should be a no-brainer. Like everybody should look at it immediately and go, I know what to do here. You know, I know that this is a search bar and I want to search for something, right? And if we get to a place where we have to send so much explanation, then I don't think we've stripped it down enough to its barest form. And you can build back up from there. But what happens is when we strip it down to its barest form, like a skateboard with four wheels, if you just took it to somebody, in the remote world and be like, here, they'd be like, okay, at least I know what to do with this. Like it slides, it goes somewhere, it's going to roll. And that's really, I think, what our goal should be as a product designer. What happens with that is PMs get in there and then it's like feature creep and feature below. You know what I mean? God bless, PMs, they're doing the best they can. So getting to that place of duh. And from there, then all the real technical stuff began. Once we had this program and we started building it, the back end alone was a massive undertaking for two reasons. Number one is not a single slot floor manufacturer has the same brains. So imagine like Konami has its own brain and Aristocrat has their own brain. And even though they're all sending the same data, there you can have 5 to 7, maybe a dozen different types of machines. And so pulling in all that data, aggregating all that data, sifting it, and then sending it back into the product. And it wasn't, an experience design thing, but I definitely helped work through it. And this is kind of cool. This is a tale of what I did at another company, brought over to another company. The company before, they would crawl the World Wide Web, as we call it, every single night, and they would scrape all these different ads. And so that when you looked at their product, you could see, like, if you were Nike and you wanted to see what Reebok was doing, we'd show you their creatives, their creative sizes, what size they were using, what websites they were on, what ad company they bought from. But they did that every night. And so when you came into the morning, you always had just fresh data. And so when I moved over to the casino company, they did the opposite. You'd go into their product, which was in Flash. This is 2019. Their product was in Flash. Yeah. Jeez. Insane. Yeah. And you'd click on a report, which was like named like, something obscure number and letter combo. You'd do this report and then you'd have to wait. It could be 5 minutes or it could be 2 hours. You never knew.
To generate the report?
Yeah, to generate the report, depending on how much data you were pulling, 3,000 slots worth of data. And so I said, hey, for this product, let's run the data overnight. And they were like, what? Every night we get all this data every day, right? And they're like, yeah. I was like, can we just compile it so that when they come in the morning, it's all fresh and new? It may not be real time yet, but it's going to be, it's going to be ready for them first thing in the morning, and they don't have to run a report. Their minds are blown. And I was like, oh, I'm so smart, but I just took an idea from the other company, was like, we could just do that here. You know what I mean? But it was like, if you didn't have that knowledge or didn't think about it, like nobody would have ever thought about that,
So that's cool, man. So a couple of things I want to dig into a little bit. One of the things that you talked about was going onto the shop floor. I said shop floor. I'm making so many correlations here between like what I was doing at GE and like so you go onto the floor. You actually had a floor too.
Yeah.
So you go onto the floor and you're talking to these people that are doing the work. I want to dig a little bit into that sort of methodology to like really uncover that. Did you give yourself metrics to learn? Did you give yourself some kind of way to track your progress and make sure like I'm going to have this by like X date and that by X date? How did you go about learning as much as you could about the gaming industry? What kind of stuff did you do? Any tips and things that you might be able to help somebody else that's joining an industry that they don't know anything about to sort of help get from that 0 to 1, like you said?
No, that's a great question. I don't know if I was as formal about the timeframes as I was about being organic about the information. I would want to schedule meetings as often as I could with, especially early on, of like, let's have a phone call, and, the company had several clients that they were really close with. And they were like, hey, they loved the company so much because of the products that they did have, that they did like, that they were always like, if you ever want, we have opinions on what a product should look like, please contact us, which is pretty rare. And maybe it's not as rare in the B2B space. In the B2C space, you have, I mean, and a lot of this stuff is, I always call it like highs and lows. If you call for feedback and they're just going to tell you everything they hate about the product and everything they love about the product. And so when you separate those things out, you have your attractors and detractors. It's in the middle ground where you really begin to find the real gems of like, okay, I know you don't like this, but what do you do in place of this? If you can't do it this way. So I started to just begin to, write up questions that I wanted to ask every, floor operator. And I just had a script and I went through it. I tested it. Like first I read through myself. This is just good user interview practice. Number 1, write a script. Number 2, read it out loud to yourself. Number 3, find a coworker and interview them. What will happen is you actually work out all the bugs beforehand. if you do that 2 or 3 times, and so then when you get to a real user and you begin to talk, because then you'd be like, oh, I didn't think about this, or you answered this in a way that, and they'll have, it may not be a perfect one-to-one with your user, but at least they'll have knowledge of, they know what you're trying to accomplish, your coworker. They'll know what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to get at. And they can be like, that could have been worded differently. Or you'll ask them the question, you're like, that's not the answer I was looking for, so I need to rephrase this. And you work out all the bugs beforehand before ever talking to a user. And that takes, 20 minutes to do something like that, to run it by a coworker and have them do the interview or whatever. So then we went in there. I just started talking to users and being like, hey, these are some questions I want to ask. And of course, when you start doing that, you get into these amazing rabbit trails of and hearing that individual's experience and what they do. And that then it's like, oh, you're writing, you're furiously writing stuff down when you're, in recording and be like, oh, I want to, mark that for later as something to come back to and refollow up as you're doing even now. Like, oh, I want to come back on that question or come back on that comment. That begins to produce sort of this baseline of qualitative content and data that says, okay, here's what so-and-so said. And are we solving that for them? Because then you may begin to see a theme of like, oh, I wish I had this, or I've tried to do this in the past and I can't do it. And you see 4 or 5 people begin to have that same problem. Like, okay, have we solved that? Do we need to solve that? Is this the right product, for that solution? As you do that, you begin to develop this wealth of user in data that allows you to build a great product. And one of the things that I always say is like, if you can get a quote from a user or 2 or 3 to back up your design decision, you will have a much more robust product. You'll be able to, someone will say, now, why did you design it like this? Well, here's 3 quotes or 2 quotes or even 1 quote. We talked to a user and this quote sort of encapsulates 4 or 5 people's different thoughts. I wanted to do this, but I couldn't do X, Y, and Z. And so like, that's why, and that helps you reinforce those design decisions. Because if you don't have that, and like I said, it can just be a great UI design. And that's totally cool. And you can do best practices on this is what a form should look like. You don't need user research to tell you what a form looks like. You know what I mean? It should look a certain way. But if you do user research and you'll begin to learn out what questions you need to actually have, not just the generic ones that everybody else wrote. Maybe you want a different one because your users are thinking about this and not about that. And so there's that combination of, when people say, you didn't do any research. Well, I've got 15 years of research. And that's how I was able to come to this decision so quickly on this particular product.
I got that wisdom.
But for this industry, the nuance is found when I when I converse with users, and I can pull out those nuggets and be like, here's the best practices. Here's how we own it for our product, which is a combination of best practices, wisdom, user research.
So I'm curious because you just brought up a good point. In the case of a junior designer who doesn't have experience to build wisdom up, right? Or there's probably a better way to say that, but I think you know what I mean.
Yep.
A junior designer who's like just getting out of a boot camp or just getting out of school or something like that has no experience to build on.
Yeah.
What's some advice that you could give them to sort of replace that wisdom or maybe supplement that wisdom is better? You're not going to replace it, but supplement it. How do you go about figuring those things out so that you don't just sit there and spin your wheels and not actually achieve anything?
Yeah.
When you're trying to learn this new industry or something.
Yeah, no, I definitely think competitive research is incredibly helpful. I think that when you're a junior designer, you can never escape time and seat, right? Just knowing how to do something. Like a couple of times I was working with a junior designer on one of my last contracts, and they were battling. They could not figure something out. And I was like, oh, just do this. You know what I mean? And they're like, well, how did you know that? I was like, well, because I've done it 10 times before, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's so competitive research, having a mentor. Now, not everyone has a senior designer or somebody above them at their company. Maybe you're a solo designer at a startup as a junior designer. Then I would reach out. I'd find people like you, people like me, all the people probably on your podcast are probably great people to reach out. And most of us are typically cool with like, hey, a couple questions here and there. And if you're going to sink, 10 hours of my time, I'd probably be like, well, that's a little too much. You can, you know what I mean? But simple questions or conversations, most people are happy to have those things, and tell somebody. And I wouldn't just come, if I was a junior designer now and I wanted to learn more from so like Jeremy, I would come to you with a problem. hey, I'm trying to solve this in my product. What would you do? And that to me is way more useful than tell me about yourself, because I can read your LinkedIn bio. And it's probably something that you've curated over the last number of years to tell the most about you in the least amount of words. And what I really need is I really need help in this situation, not just like, like I said, don't just say, tell me about yourself, or, how did you get into UX? Like, does that really matter? It's like, I want to know, like, how would you solve this problem? Or how can I be a better interviewer? Could you help me with that? Or could you look at my portfolio? Like, I would ask and I think that's kind of thing is, general questions go generally unanswered. Specific questions get specific answers. And depending on how you want your questions to be answered, that's how specific you should be. And so that's why, if I was a junior designer now, mentor, find somebody to mentor you. I do competitive research. And what happens with competitive research, obviously one of the downfalls of it is if you just do what Facebook does, or you just do what Google does, or you just do what Fang company does, that doesn't make it right. They have billions of users. Like Amazon is a great example, right? Probably just the ugliest website out there. But at the same time, they are a multi-trillion-dollar company. So their user experience is so well designed, in spite of their hideous UI, they still know what they're doing. And so what I would do is I would take for lack of better terms, I would take the heart of what they're doing and say, here's how they're getting a user to, let's just say, convert your shopping into your shopping cart. How do they do it best? How can I apply that to my company here? How can I do as equally good a job and still make great design? Like for comparison's sake, like if you look at Walmart's website versus Amazon, like Walmart is a beautiful website. Like it's a bento box style website, really nice color schemes, rounded corners. And yet that they have the same kind of thing. It's like Amazon doesn't have to be so ugly, but they don't have to not be so ugly either, because they are making billions of dollars every quarter. So what do they care,
So I love that. I want to talk a little bit more about like casino in general, because this is so fascinating to me. I honestly, like you said, I have been to a casino, I think maybe twice. Once because I went to a coffee shop inside the Starbucks at the Harrah's in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And the other time I went for a bachelor party, and I think I spent $10 on like one slot machine in a matter of like 15 minutes.
You are a gambler.
So I don't know much about casinos. From your experience, I'm curious, what are some interesting, unique things about casino UX? Now, in your case, I know you were doing more like enterprise level stuff, so maybe there was less casino. It was really more just like floor management happened to be for casino. But I'm curious, working in casinos and gaming, interesting, unique things that you've uncovered working in gaming that people might not experience in other industries.
Casino industry, obviously, is like I said, on the B2B side of things, there was an interesting dichotomy of it's heavy psychology in a casino. There's no windows. There's no clocks. There's sounds everywhere. There's excitement all around you. Literally 24/7 in a casino. And so to me, like there's this incredible experience, like case study, right? Like you think about just on, the way when somebody walks into a casino, what's different about like a tribal casino versus a Las Vegas casino is a Las Vegas casino is heavily dependent on people coming 1, 2 times, maybe 5 times a year, where the tribal casinos are entirely dependent on regulars. So the casinos here in San Diego, where I'm at, they probably, they shuttle in. Again, I'm not doing this. This is casinos doing this. They're shuttling in senior citizens on the daily to play slot machines and get free food,
Really?
Food and beverage, and they spend hundreds of dollars, a day. And the casino knows that. It's called the theoretical win. And so like you will have a theoretical win of $25 because you only go once a year. I may have a theoretical win of $5,000 because I go often. And so if I'm a casino, who do I want more of? I want more Casey's than Jeremy's, no offense, because Casey's going to spend more. You know what I mean? So there's a theoretical, then there's what's called an actual win. And that is how much did you actually, and win is for the casino, not for you, by the way, because
of course.
An actual win is a loss for us. So I'm actually losing $5,000, whatever. So you have this interesting dichotomy. So there's the regulars that are coming almost like Monday through Friday, like kind of like a job. They shuttle them in, for lunch. They go to the buffet, they get, $50 off the buffet or whatever, and they're a platinum member. And then they go and they hit the machines for 2 or 3, 4 hours, and then they go home. And on the weekends, there will be, there's a casino in LA called Yamava, and it is probably the most profitable casino in America.
Really?
Yeah.
What makes it? Is there a reason why? Like that one happens to
It
be?
is just that it's like an hour outside of downtown LA. It's the closest casino to the LA metro area. It's in San Bernardino officially. It's, Vegas is obviously another 5 hours. San Diego is, 2+ hours given traffic in LA on any given weekend. And so I was there and we were talking to slot floor operators, great guy, really nice, super friendly. And I was leaving at like 3:00 and people were running into the casino to play games. And he was like, yeah, he's like, that's pretty typical. And it was like a Thursday. It wasn't like a Friday or Saturday or Sunday or anything like that. People are running into the casino to get to their favorite game. And he's like, yeah, we typically would have to kick off like $100 theoretical win player in place for like a $250 or $500 or $1,000, or they'll reserve a machine for the evening, hoping that like a $500 theoretical win player would come in. And so you can't play that machine. They're waiting because it's more profitable for them to wait for that one person, that one whale to come in, than to let the little minnows divvy up that machine. Super fascinating. Really, like I said, super psychological.
So here's something that I'm curious about, because with gaming, obviously, I feel like there's a lot of ethical implications, right?
Yeah.
And so like when you think about this, like you just mentioned, and we were making jokes about how a win, no, that's not for you, by the way, that's for the casino, which implies that obviously the person gambling is losing.
Right.
And obviously the casinos are making enough money because so many people lose all their money. I'm curious, how do you handle that aspect of it with the ethical implications? Do you shove it under a rug? Do you work through it somehow? Or is all of your sort of design decisions based around sort of minimizing that ethical impact, decreasing deceptive patterns, things like that? I'm curious how that plays out in your head.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, on one hand, there's a level of addiction on everything. You have, for lack of better terms, you have a casino in your pocket. If you ever played a free-to-play game and you've bought something, you bought nothing. You know what I mean? You upgraded your skin to whatever, you know what I mean? So I say casino in a pocket specifically because in mobile gaming, there was the Japanese have a term called gacha, Gacha. And it's a type of game that they all play, that they're just arcades everywhere in Tokyo and in all sorts of Japan. They're essentially like fun little variable reward games that you could win a prize or not win a prize. And they're super addictive. And they're essentially slot machines, but they're just like the Japanese version of a non-slot machine. And so that concept of gacha or variable rewards was introduced into free-to-play. And you'll see this in something like a daily reward where you will get, if I spend your 20 coins and spin the wheel and see if you win anything, right? So the psychology of rewards was the lowest level is if you press this button, sort of the Pavlov, you get a reward. Well, what happens is if you get the same reward every single time after, 5, 10 times, whatever, eventually you'll get bored of it, right? So then they were like, well, what if you don't get it every time? There was a variability in it. And they were like, okay, well, if you don't do it, they don't get a reward every 3 times or whatever, that still doesn't keep them playing. So then there was like, let's add variability and let's add sort of the size of the reward, like so there's a double variability, like how often, and then how much or how big the reward is. So that's like when you think about the Wheel of Fortune, 500, 1,000, 250, bankrupt, you know what I mean? Win a car, like all of a sudden what that does to your dopamine is like it sends it through the roof. Like I'm going to spin this thing and I have a chance to win $1 million, right? It's the lotto mentality. Like I could be a billionaire, it's like, well, you literally will not be. Like you have a greater chance of, getting eaten by a swarm of bees or, whatever the insane probability, 1 in 500 million or whatever. So we see that pattern across almost everything now. Almost everything is essentially a slot machine in many respects, including our phones of, the notification is a dopamine hit, and not to say that makes it all good, just to say that it is what it is. So when I'm working in the industry and we're talking about like, hey, how can I how could you work on a slot floor and make it easier for somebody to bet more money? You know what I mean? It's, my first priority is to the user that I'm currently working with, you know what I mean? And then the second user down the line, the actual casino slot floor player, they have to call 1-800-GAMBLER. Not in a bad way, but like we all have self-control, you know what I mean? And we all are able to make those decisions. And, the sort of experience design reduces as much friction as possible. Disneyland, it is so easy to spend lots of money there, you know what I mean? And if you look at sort of a comparison that I'll often talk about is if you go to Disneyland and spend $1,000, is that different than you going to the casino and spending $1,000 if you had fun at both?
Yeah, if you got the value personally out of it, right? Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned like in the case of like anything, you get the dopamine hit. I mean, like I guess some people would ask like if you joined Facebook or Meta, like the ethical implications of joining Facebook, right? I mean,
Right.
Some people might, but most people probably wouldn't think twice about, oh wow, cool, you got a job at Meta, or Google or any other big social media companies. It's kind of funny. There's like this, I don't know, there's this stigma, I guess, around gambling, but there's no stigma around social media for some reason. But when in reality, you're doing very similar things. So it's kind of interesting. I'm curious about deceptive patterns and things like that, because I feel like when you're designing something for the casino world, you're going to probably have stakeholders, product managers, people that are pushing very hard for designing a deceptive pattern so that we trick someone into doing a thing they probably wouldn't want to do or may not have wanted to do. I'm curious, like, is that something you've come across? Again, maybe like with the enterprise stuff, it's probably less of a concern. I don't know. I'm curious. Is that something you've had to deal with? And if so, like, how do you work through that? Is it a conversation like any other conversation where you disagree with the stakeholder, or is there some different kind of ethical implications there?
I think where you'd see that most is actually in mobile games. I can't think of the name, but basically it was one of those sort of maintenance games. All you did was just like buy more armies and buy things like that. And it was like, you can either break the clock. I've got to wait 2 hours for this to fill, or I could spend $10 and get it right now. You know what I mean? And you see a lot of that. And actually, a couple of years ago, there was a big push by the U.S. government specifically to remove that heavy gotcha, those techniques where it was like you're basically implementing casino type of patterns into mobile games so that kids were getting addicted to mobile games. And there was a guy who spent, a kid who spent $1,000 on his parents' iTunes, account. Just like, I just bought so much stuff because it was so easy. And it's interesting to me. Like, I agree with you. Like, there is a stigma on gambling, and there should be. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not afraid to say that. Like, if you are out of control, then you need to call 1-800-GAMBLER, which is a real number, by the way, for gambling addicts. And it's like you need to call that, and you need to not go. Equally, I would say if you are addicted to your phone, you should get rid of it and get a flip phone. You know what I mean? I would be that bold about it. It's like if you look at your screen time and look at your pickups and look at your notifications. Like, I only have badges, on my apps. And even then, I only have badges on a handful of apps of things I feel that are important, like text messages, maybe emails, and maybe things that I want, you know what I mean, that I'm interested in. But if you're addicted to anything, you have to separate yourself and stop that dopamine flow, because what happens is, like, this happens even in, like, when they look at people who look at pornography, it creates a groove in your brain, and it forms such a heavy groove that until you break out of that, until you do something totally different to break that groove, you have to reform and create a new groove of the healthy pattern, because that level, and they basically say crack cocaine users and porn users almost have the exact same level of groove because of the dopamine release, and that they begin to see that in gambling, in phone addiction. They're saying similar patterns arise as a result of that. Yeah, and so it's like you can get down on casinos all day long, but I would get down on Apple the same way. It's like you guys have way too many patterns in here. So they started clamping down in a good way on the phones to be like, hey, these are in kids' hands. At least with a casino, there's an age gate, right? You got to be 18 or 20, 21 and up. You can't be you can just walk through and that's it, or you can't even come in here at all. There's at least some age gate, but on the phone, you can get around that. Some kid could just type in an older birth date or whatever. And so there was essentially no regulation in that. I don't think that was the original intent with phones and things like that, but it's where we are now. And it's like a real issue. as a designer, I'm always like, I'll see things and I'll be like, wow, that is a rude pattern. That is a deceptive pattern that you have introduced in there. You'll see this too, like e-commerce companies will be like, do you want 20% off? Yes, sign your email. And then like the secondary call to action will be like, no, I hate free things.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I said. Like, get your passive aggressiveness away from me and just let me make the decision on my own. If your product is really that good, then yes, I will want 20% off. But if it sucks and it's mediocre, I won't buy it anyway.
That's such a great point too. I think it's like, I don't know. I watched The Social Dilemma not long ago.
Yeah.
Well, this was like actually a couple years ago now. And like immediately, dude, when the credits rolled, I deleted Facebook, I deleted Twitter, I deleted like all those things, mostly because of like the same exact stuff that you're kind of thinking about. But it's just funny. I don't know. There's so many people that just don't think about those things. So I'm curious, as you were learning all this stuff, any like challenges along the way, things that you overcame that maybe you would want to let people know, maybe not specifically around gaming, but if it is, that's cool too, about learning from 0 to 1. Getting into the groove and getting to a point where you felt like you could deliver.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest things are learning to converse with. I always say this, like, you want to converse with developers and PMs as early as possible in the process, and that is a flip flop from sort of a graphic design, creative design mentality where you gather information from somebody and then you go into your magic box and then it's like, ta-da! Here's the show, and you're getting this. And no, don't ask me any questions because I'm the artist, right? With UX design, it's very much the opposite. It's not designed by committee. That's not what I'm saying. But if there are requirements that you're designing for, and the engineering team says like, I can't do that, or that's way out of scope, you have to be able to adjust your designs accordingly. And if you find that out after doing a month of design work or even a week of design work, that was wasted time. And so to have, your engineers and your PMs early and often, like, I would rather do 1,000 fast iterations than one big lump sum. Like, just here's what I'm looking at. Are we on the same page? Are we talking through the right things? And obviously at this stage of my career, I know a lot of the limitations that engineers have. Going back to the casino one where it's like, hey, we can't really do this because we have all these different operators, manufacturers that we have to pull data in. And so it's not going to be as easy as you think it is in your brain. I always have a joke with engineers. I'm like, look, I did the design. It should be fine. It's easy. I already did it. It should be easy. I designed it. Now you just go build it. You know what I mean? They're like, well, it's not that easy because I got to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, you lost me on technicalities. I'm leaving this conversation, beep. But just the ability to talk with essentially your close stakeholders, which would be your PMs and your engineers, and then being able to talk through the larger stakeholders, the VP of product or the CEO, depending on the size of the company, that those all vary, or director of design. And knowing when, I think one of the best things you need to know as a junior designer is know when to send it upline. Like, I don't know if I should be doing, like, one decision we had, I saw they were on a different design team, but I was still, I was still a senior manager of design at the time. And I was like, hey, that you need to send that up to your director. You need to show them this. I said, here's why. Here's a couple things I would do differently. But you need to let them know if you're going to try and make this decision. Like, you need to include them so that they can either dissuade you or join with you and have the same mentality. Because ultimately, your managers, your principals, your seniors, your design directors, they're on your team, and you want them to, if they're really good, they will fight for you if you're making the right decision. If you're making the wrong decision, hopefully they can, they would persuade you and be like, here's why that's not a good decision, and here's what I would do instead. And that way you can save face and not make a huge punk out of yourself by making, a bunch of bad decisions or whatever,
So Casey, we've been talking to you for a little bit. Before we get out of here, I got some questions I'd like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, any other closing thoughts? Anything else that you want to share that we didn't get a chance to talk about as far as going from 0?
I think the best thing you can do, no matter what stage you're in, is remain humble. Sort of the cliche of like humble and hungry, but it's real. Like, I don't know everything, and I am okay to say, I'll get back to you on that, and then go and find out the answer. I think that's okay, and then that's something that should be continually just reminded of designers. Like, we don't know everything. I can't know everything. Ever can know a lot of things, and I can be right about a lot of things, but there's going to be some things where I just don't know. And being willing to say that. One of the best things you can learn early on in your UX design career is that your goal should be to break the product. You want to find the break points, not create a perfect product at first, the first go up. You probably won't anyway in the first round. So it's like, be willing to be like, this product will be broken. I want to find those spots as early as possible. I can't know everything. And you'll find that users, no matter how great of a product you design or how great of a user flow you design, you will find that users will find a way to do something differently than you imagine. And it always happens, no matter how well I thought about it, how much user research I've done, how many stuff, it always, somebody finds a way to do something differently than you thought of. And you're like, that was the edge case I did not think of.
For sure. Yeah. And that's such good advice too. I mean, in general, life in general, UX design, life, whatever, just embrace the fact that you don't know everything. I like, that's the idea of Socratic ignorance. You don't know what you don't know. The only thing you know is you don't know everything, hopefully. And, going into the new scenarios, learning new things, new tools, whatever, be humble and just embrace the fact that like, you don't know, and there's always more to learn. And you can apply that across the board, life in general, when you got kids, grandkids, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I think that's excellent parting advice, Casey. All right.
Cool.
Casey, before we get out of here, I got some questions I want to ask you. You got some time to stick around? You got to run. I know we're kind of getting hit in our end time here. You got some time? Awesome, dude. All right. First up, whatever comes to mind, you don't have to think too hard about these. Your favorite non-design book?
Favorite non-design book? Ooh, that's a good question. Not in a cliche way. I read the Bible every day. I think that it is a design book in many respects. Talks about the design of humanity and human thinking. And then I would also say, I'm trying to think of a book I've read that I've been reading the Gray Man series, which is a fiction series. That's it's interesting. You know what I mean? Netflix did a movie off the first book, really good. Ryan Gosling's in it. They're kind of like techno thrillers, really interesting stuff, really well versed, a little bit sarcastic. It's like a sarcastic mega spy kind of thing. So really interesting, really, really great details. I don't know if I really enjoyed Steve Jobs' autobiography.
Oh, nice. Okay. I haven't read that. I know everybody talks about it, but
it was a great one. I am reading Elon Musk's, and it has not gone as smoothly as reading Steve Jobs. And so I'm like halfway through it, whereas like Steve Jobs, I cruised through, like so easy to read because I don't know if it was just his interesting tale. I mean, because Elon Musk has fascinating stuff too. I don't know if it's just because he's so current and maybe because he's still alive. I don't know, but it's not as digestible as Steve Jobs was for some reason. But yeah, that's a great biography to read.
Yeah, is it because like the difference between this Jobs biography and Elon Musk? I wonder if like, did Elon write his own? Did Steve Jobs had a ghostwriter, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or he had a biographer?
No, it was the same. The same biographer wrote both.
Oh, was it really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I was like, oh, this is going to be as good as Steve Jobs. At least the writing is excellent. I mean, I'm not saying that, but just I don't know if it's maybe because it's so current and I've essentially. I mean, it's I don't know. It's interesting. It's just like it's not as captivating.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know why. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. I didn't realize they had the same biographer wrote both, but I don't know. Elon Musk, he's such an interesting dude. That guy is, I don't know, love him or hate him, he's an interesting dude. All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast?
Oh, I've been listening to Smartless. It's Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean. I can't think of Sean's last name at the current moment. He was on Will and Grace. But it's like imagine three guys just making jokes about each other and interviewing people, and that's what Smartless is. And of course, they have all they're all who Jason Bateman and Will Arnett are, and all those guys.
Yeah. I guess they're like, I mean, they're from. Well, they were both on
Arrested Development.
Arrested Development, and I guess they're friends outside. But speaking of Will Arnett, have you seen? This is not a podcast, but it's a show. Will Arnett, and actually Jason Bateman was on one of the episodes too. This like improv show where he's like a detective, and they get like a guest to come on, and there's not scripted, and it's all improv. Have you seen that? I can't remember the name. It's so funny, dude.
The only reason I saw it was because they promoted it on the podcast, and I watched it.
Oh, did they?
The podcast is funnier.
Is it really? Okay. All right. I'll have to check out the podcast. Well, that was like such a good show.
Yeah. Listen to the Justin Thoreau interview. It's like just a bunch of like guys just having like inside jokes, you know what I mean, about sort of Hollywood and life and in general. And they ask some funny questions and they're always kind of just ripping on each other for asking dumb things and things like that. It's humorous. If you want funny stuff, Smartless is a hilarious podcast.
All right, I'm adding it to my list. I've always listened to podcasts when I'm doing the dishes, so I'll add it to my list. I'll listen to it tonight. I'll report back and let you know what I think. All right, what is your favorite meal? This could be something you've cooked, something you've had at a restaurant, something your grandma used to cook. Favorite meal?
Favorite meal? I could eat a cheeseburger every single day in the week. I don't because I would be enormous. But so I love cheeseburgers, and I would have steak as often as I possibly can.
Ooh, I'm with you, dude. I love good burger. Let me make a question about burgers. Do you like a grilled burger or like a smash burger? Like thin, crispy edges, or a big, like juicy grill, thick grilled burger? What are your favorite? Which do you got a favorite?
Yes.
Or
the answer is yes.
Okay.
Both. Because I mean, obviously, we're in the land of In-N-Out, so I hit In-N-Out maybe once a week, and I've got 2 teenage boys, and so we'll go In-N-Out all the time and get double doubles and things like that. But then I also love like a good steakhouse burger. Like most of the stuff I cook at home is, a sort of the fat burger, you know what I mean? And then when I go out, I love a good smash burger though. I love that crispy edge, melted American cheese.
So we don't have In-N-Out up here in the Midwest. I'm outside of Cincinnati, but we do have Culver's. And if you ever get a chance to have a Culver's burger, dude, oh my God. I personally, in my opinion, I think it's better than In-N-Out. Probably has something to do with the butter they slather on like the bread before they add all the other crap. But dude, it is so good. It is like one of the best fast food burgers I've ever had. And I would say even high, like beyond fast food, like just one of the best burgers I've ever had. It's so freaking good. And they have frozen custard too, which like, you can't beat that, man. Oh man. Anyway, Culver's, if you ever get a chance, they're mostly in the Midwest, and it's like Wisconsin. They use like Wisconsin butter and cheese and all that.
Ooh, yeah. Nice.
But dude, oh my God. If you ever get a chance, Culver's, check it out. All right. What is your favorite vacation spot?
Favorite vacation spot? We have Palm Springs is like a great local favorite spot. And then Maui is always it's always high on the list.
Right on, dude. Yeah, I guess you guys being out in LA, you've got like quick flights to Maui, I assume, or quicker.
Yeah. It's only it's only 3.5. Yeah, maybe it's
not bad. It's like a 12-hour flight from me. It's like hours just to get to California, and then hours to get. That's awesome, man. I've never been. Everybody loves Hawaii, obviously for obvious reasons. I've never been. At some point, I will go. But for now, I got 2 kids, and just being in a car with them for like any amount of time just is. Whew, we do very short road trips. All right.
Yeah.
Last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Pen and paper.
Oh, I love it. I love a good pen and paper. I'm with you, man. You got a favorite pen? What's your favorite pen?
I do have some really cool pens. These you can probably get them on Amazon, of course. Zebra makes this pen. You won't be able to see it on the podcast, but they have different lengths of tips, and they're Japanese pens. You can get them at like Daiso.
Oh, nice, dude.
Which is and then these pens, this is called Prismacolor, and they have like a fat, almost like a highlighter edge on it.
Oh,
which
nice,
again,
dude. Those are for your sticky notes when you whiteboard, I assum.
Exactly, yeah. And then and then it's got like a tight edge, and so it's cool to have. Like I've got like a light gray and a dark gray, and 70. It's cool because like this is 70% black, and so it's like it sort of translates into the digital world. And then I'll have like a CTA color. This one's a light kind of turquoise.
Oh,
light
you do a little sketching. I love it, dude. Oh,
exactly. Great, so I'll do like a light gray, and then as I refine things, I can go in on like the 70% black, and then I can make like CTAs in that blue color, and I can sort of do levels of fidelity as you're working through it. User flows.
I love that. That is really cool. Yeah, and for only $5 a month, you can subscribe to become a member of Beyond UX Design and see those pens on YouTube.
Yeah,
but only for $5 a month.
Only for $5, exactly.
All right, Casey, this is awesome, man. I really enjoyed talking to you. This is such a fascinating topic. Just beyond obviously learning a new industry is something every UX designer needs to think about. But just like learning more about casinos and gaming, I don't know. It's just such a fascinating thing. I love talking to people in industries that I have no experience in at all. And I definitely learned a lot. So I really appreciate you coming on. But before we get out of here, let everybody know online what you got going on, where they can find you, and all that stuff. Give yourself a plug.
Yeah, definitely. Find me on LinkedIn. That's where I talk the most. LinkedIn and X.com, formerly known as Twitter. I'm literally the one and only Casey Bombacie on earth. There's only one of me with that name. There's probably a couple Jeremy Millers, but there's only one Casey
There's
Bombacie.
plenty of Jeremy Millers. I love that that name is so great. Like, I just want to think, like, I don't know if you heard, probably stop me if you heard this before, but like Casey and Bombacie, Banana Fana Faux Facey. You ever hear that? Is that something people would?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've heard them all. Yeah, like even when you said you're like, oh, you should be like a rapper. Like I've heard that all my life. Like you should be a rapper with that name, and I was like, I mean, I rap gifs, so that's kind of what I have.
Professional rapper.
Yeah, exactly. So pretty much all social media, I am at Casey Bombacie or whatever, and then
Casey Bombacie. All right.
Yep, and then happydesign.io is my main business.
Right on, man. Awesome, dude. Yeah, and we'll link to all that in the show notes. That's Casey Bombacie, Bombacie.
Correct.
I was pronouncing it incorrectly until we actually had a chance to talk, and I got to ask you how to. I was Bombacie, I think, or what was I saying? Bombacie.
Yeah, Bombacie or
whatever. Anyway, now I know Casey Bombacie, Banana Fana Faux Facey. I'll never forget that. If I met you at a networking event, I guarantee I would never forget your name.
Yes, true. Very true.
I would forget everybody else went right in one ear, right out the other, but yours, I would not forget your name. So I think it's a blessing. I don't know. You're a lucky man to have it.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I love it.
Right on. All right, Casey, thanks again for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. It's not great having you. It's great having me. No,
it was great. You're right.
It was great talking to you, and I'm glad we got to do this.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Casey and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on how you can go from 0 to 1. As Casey said, remember, you got to be like water, just like Bruce Lee says, and find your way around whatever obstacle you're going to face. Because let's be honest, you are most likely not going to get a job at your perfect industry, in your ideal industry, at your dream job right off the bat, at least not at first. So you're probably going to have to slug it out in an industry that you likely know nothing about. But what's it been like for you? Did you land a job in an industry where you don't know anything about it at all? How'd you succeed? How'd you thrive? Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then for the love of God, tell them about it. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Beyond UX Design, master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes, unlock the secrets of UX success, and learn all the things they didn't teach you in school. Use the promo code LISTENER for 10% off. Just head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book to pick up your copy today. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, and many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free. And you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, even episodes before they're released. You can get instant access to the video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. If you've been sitting on building your new website, Wix Studio can help get you there fast. Wix Studio is a powerful platform that lets you create and manage websites easily. With Wix Studio, you can quickly adapt designs for every device, reuse assets, and my favorite, export from Figma in just a click, and much more. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/Wix today. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.